other, on the symptoms prior to LDN, it goes from A to Z. It's amazing what sort of side effects or symptoms people had prior to taking LDN. Bizarre things, not so bizarre things. Movement and sensory were the big issues. Okay, people had a hard time moving, or people were they had a problem with balance. Another issue, and that's in the other, is bladder and bowel. Okay, those are the big ones: the balance, the stiffness, and the bowel and bladder. Those are the ones that reoccur on my telephone conversations and are held out here with this data. Okay, last exacerbation. This is for people who have been on LDN for up to 1 year. Okay, so we held it to 1 year. These were the exacerbations. And last year, when we presented, we also saw this bimodal type of thing. The first 6 months, we saw an increase of folks on LDN. Now, the question that comes up and is in my mind is, were they on LDN quick enough? Was this an exacerbation that was going to happen no matter what we did? Or was this something that LDN couldn't cover? There's still a big question about that first time. Then, the greater than 2 years, okay, we saw that also. Now the question is are you taking your LDN the right way? We saw last year's data that the vast majority of people were not taking the LDN the right way. We saw that people thought they were cured and they stopped taking their LDN. Again, last year's survey really convinced me of this, because last year there were people who thought they were cured, stopped their drug, had an exacerbation, said, and went back on their LDN, and not one of those people, and we checked this year, not one of those people have had an exacerbation. So that seems to me to be like an unofficial crossover study. Okay? You have people, a crossover study is where you have separate arms in a study, and people get active drug, then they get inactive drug or placebo, and then they go back to active drug. And if there's any issues in that placebo group, then you know that the drug is actually working. Simplistic. Okay? So again, we have this bimodal thing. We have 2 peaks, and I wonder why. Maybe next year we'll actually find out why. Length of time for exacerbations. Again, these are people that have been on LDN, but this data is, we're talking specifically about exacerbations prior to them being on LDN. Okay, so 12 patients had exacerbations every 6 months. 10 patients had exacerbations between 6 months and a year. 9 of them had them about 1 to 2 years, and then 14 of them had them over 2 years. I have not been able to find data, nor have my students in the last 24 months been able to find data that gives me an average to an exacerbation untreated. If you read the information that's presented by the commercial manufacturers of MS drugs, there is no consistency between the data. It's unbelievable. The kids that I had in this year were really good statisticians. The first week that they're with me, we look at MS drugs, and we look at the commercially available products. And most of the kids have been blowing it off. These kids really got into it. And their answer to me, my question is, how often do these people get exacerbations? Their answer to me this time was, we can't tell. Because having one exacerbation in 2 years is not the same thing as having 2 exacerbations in 4 years. It's not the same data. So you pull up the data, their information, and you compare it to what LDN, and again, this is a no-brainer. For the purpose of complete disclosure, I sell low-dose naltrexone. My accountant tells me now I'm making about 32 cents per month on it. So I'm making a fortune on naltrexone. That's the interest of... Okay, symptom change, and this is really what I'm interested in. You know, how do you feel? How are you feeling now? You've been on LDN for a while. How do you feel now? 56% of the people have said that their symptoms have improved. Now remember, this drug is not to improve symptoms. This isn't an aspirin to make your headache go away. This is a drug that is to prevent progressions, okay, or slow down progressions and prevent exacerbations. This is what the drug does. But 56% of our patients say that it improves their symptoms, their activity of daily living, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But all those symptoms that we were talking about before, the bowel and bladder type of things, they're improved. Now, you add that to your no change. Okay, now no change is what the drug is supposed to do. You're supposed to be where you are now. Okay, and if you add those two up, you get 88%. Okay, so 88% of the people who are taking this drug in our survey are getting the results that we are saying you're going to get. Okay, now, anybody that knows any drug whatsoever, including vaccines, that have that good of a response, raise your hand. I do this lecture at sort of MS Society meetings in South Florida, and you know, it's never billed as a lecture on LDN, but I come in and and the docs are sitting there and they look at me and they don't answer, and then they sort of slime their way out the door. Because, again, you know, I'm not a rocket scientist here. I'm just, you know, a regular old pharmacist. Come on. This is a no-brainer. I keep on saying that. People say, why isn't this out here? You know, my head used to be shaped right. It's from banging my head on the wall, okay? This is a no-brainer. I think I said that the first time I was at one of these conferences, and I think I've said it every time since. Okay, side effects. 61% of the patients have had no side effects. 39% have had side effects. Now that's increased from last year's data, the yes part of the side effects. Last year there were 74% of the patients who had no side effects. What are the side effects? I think that's the next slide. Yep. The side effects, and now again, this is that 39%, okay? Now, this slide represents that 39%. 53% of them have had sleep disturbances. That sleep disturbances is vivid dreams. I'm here to testify. You have vivid dreams. But for those of you who are old enough to remember Peter Pan, remember you sprinkle fairy dust and think good thoughts? I think my second night on it, I was thinking good thoughts because I had a really good book on sailing. And I didn't have any, I had good dreams that night. I think there's a difference between good dreams, bad dreams, and vivid dreams. I can't give you a clinical definition for that, but the second night my dreams were vivid and they were good. They weren't, you know, scary. And I really haven't had a problem since then.